Welcome to Thursday Dairy Update. This is Kathy Barrett with the Cornell PRODAIRY program, and along with Dairy Business Communications, we'd like to welcome you to this webinar series. Today we have Dr. Julio Giordano, who's on faculty at Cornell University. Julio is a veterinarian, PhD, and does research and teaching on reproductive management for dairy cattle. And today we're fortunate to have him with us to talk about reproductive management, focusing on the second and subsequent service.
It's my pleasure for me to be leading this seminar today. And as Kathy mentioned, we discussed first service postpartum last week. So today's webinar is a continuation of reproductive management. In this case, we'll be discussing second and subsequent breeding. And one of the main reasons why I like to separate first breeding from second and subsequent breeding is because we use on commercial dairy farms different types of reproductive management programs, and there are some very different considerations at the time of selecting a reproductive management program for second and subsequent services. I'll start by touching on some of the important concepts related to reproductive management for second and subsequent services before I embark on a description of the different alternatives that dairy farms have available and on the latest research that is being conducted in the area of synchronization of ovulation protocols and management strategies for second and subsequent breeding. So, a very important concept when thinking about a reproductive management program for second and subsequent breeding is the impact of the program on the interval between two successive inseminations, as I have represented here on this slide, so the time frame between an insemination and the subsequent one. This graph is a description of the frequency of artificial insemination for breeding for a dairy farm. And basically what this graph is showing you is a frequency for the number of days in between services. So the taller the bar in the graph, the more cows have their respective interval between inseminations. So in the x-axis, we start here on the left with a previous insemination, and we see the number of days until cows receive their subsequent insemination. So basically, the importance of this graph, or the value of looking at this graph, is that allow us to see or have an idea of whether or not we are implementing a program that is minimizing as much as possible the interval between inseminations, given the importance of that interval. So as you can appreciate in the figure, basically we have an example here of a dairy farm that is inseminating cows mostly based on estrus detection, and therefore the majority of the cows are receiving their second and subsequent insemination within a 20 to 30-day interval after their previous breeding. This is certainly not a problem, and is something that is desired in order to minimize the intervening interval. However, if you keep observing the distribution of the frequency of the breedings to the right of the graph, we can see how many cows, in this case for this dairy farm in particular, more than 40% of the inseminations will happen beyond 45 days after the previous insemination. This is certainly something that is undesired in order to maximize reproductive performance, because the longer time between inseminations, the longer will be the service, the 21-day service rate for the farm. So basically, this is a situation in which the farm is not proactively working with their cows for their second and subsequent breeding, and a lot of cows are being bred too late after their previous insemination. That is certainly not good because research has shown, as well as observations from commercial dairy farms, that long interbreeding intervals are detrimental to reproductive performance, and as a result, they are also detrimental to the profitability of dairy herds. So, again, long interbreeding intervals are undesired, and it's something that we need to try to avoid as much as possible in dairy herds. So, when thinking about the parameter that is used the most to evaluate the speed or the rate at which cows become pregnant during lactation, the number one parameter used today to evaluate reproductive performance, which is 21-day pregnancy rate, and which all farms want to optimize or maximize. This parameter depends on two main components. One of those is the service rate, or the rate or speed at which cows are inseminated, whereas the other parameter of interest is the conception risk or pregnancies per AI, which also is very critical to achieve a high 21-day pregnancy rate. From the perspective of reproductive management programs for second and subsequent breeding, the interbreeding interval will mostly affect the service rate. So the longer the interval between inseminations, the lower the service rate for the farm, and because of that, farms will observe a decline in their 21-day pregnancy rate. So whenever a farm has a problem with a long interbreeding interval, the problem will be obvious when looking at the 21-day service rate and, of course, the 21-day pregnancy rate. As we discussed last week, for first insemination postpartum, dairy farms will always want to optimize the reproductive performance by maximizing the 21-day pregnancy rate or any other parameter that the farm uses to monitor reproductive performance. And there will be a starting point at which the farm needs to make the decision of which reproductive program will be used to inseminate and get cows pregnant. And my take on the type and the options and how farms should think about reproductive management programs is that there are many options out there. People in research, as researchers continue to work on developing new strategies to manage cows and to get them pregnant, and sometimes it can be a little overwhelming. But basically, my take or my recommendation to people is that there's not a single way to manage cows to achieve reproductive success, but rather we have multiple options and different strategies to get to the same result. However, it is possible to separate these management strategies in two large categories. We have programs that will tend to rely more heavily on the use of estrus detection and artificial insemination. And I would like to bring to your attention the abbreviation for estrus breeding, which throughout my presentation will be either ED plus AI or EDAI. You will see a lot of that. And then cows that are not detected in estrus for various reasons will go on through a time artificial insemination program. This is likely the most common strategy by far in the majority of the conventional commercial dairy farms in the U.S. and the one that we will discuss the most today during my seminar. On the other hand, we have the other extreme. In this case, dairy farms rely more heavily on the use of time artificial insemination programs. And farms that do this will probably have different reasons. One of those is potentially the inability to detect cows in estrus or their desire to not work with cows, to not work with estrus detection. So we have these two main type of strategies, and we will start today discussing the first option that includes a combination of estrus detection with time AI. Before any discussion of reproductive management strategies, it is very important to keep in mind that not every farm can use the same reproductive program. There are, a lot of sources of variation across farms. There are a lot of differences out there across farms. So what is important is that both dairy producers and consultants understand what options are available, and based on the farm resources that they have available to work and implement the reproductive management program, they select the best program for their own farm. There are many factors that will be important to consider. Of course, a very critical one is people, is whether or not the farm has available the people that are trained and capable of conducting probably a little more complex reproductive management programs. The use of technology such as dairy software to generate a list of cows, the use of electronic identification systems to find cows more easily, and of course the use of technologies that can be implemented to improve reproductive performance, such as automated activity monitoring systems for heat detection, or the use of synchronization of ovulation. While some farms may benefit more by using automated activity monitoring systems, other farms may benefit more by using synchronization of ovulation programs for time AI. So it's up to the farm and their consultants to evaluate what are the resources available and what is the best option for the particular farm. For management of second and subsequent breeding, another factor that is very important to take into consideration is the type of non-pregnancy diagnosis test that is available to the dairy farm. As most of you must know very well, today in the industry we have three main types or three main options to conduct non-pregnancy testing. We have rectal palpation, transrectal ultrasound, and the use of chemical tests for detection of hormones related to pregnancy, both in blood and in milk. So the type of non-pregnancy diagnosis method that the farm is available will probably have an influence on the type of reproductive management program that can be implemented at a particular farm. So with that said, we'll start discussing some of the alternatives that are available for dairy farms for second and subsequent breeding. And again, we'll start by focusing on those that combine heat detection with time AI. This is the same graph that I showed you earlier to depict the consequences of not having a proactive and consistent reproductive management program for second and subsequent breeding, where the biggest problem is the fact that a pretty high proportion of the cows are inseminated very late after their previous insemination. This is probably an extreme case of a dairy farm that has more than 40% of the cows inseminated more than 45 days from their previous AI. So when thinking about the potential impact of using a combination of estrus detection and time AI, the biggest consideration is what are the potential benefits of using a time AI program for second and subsequent breeding. And that is the ability to reduce the interbreeding interval. If you contrast the distribution of breeding from herd B, which I'm showing you now, versus the previous herd, it is very clear that herd B is more proactive, and through the use of a resynchronization of ovulation programs is achieving or it is being able to reduce their intervening interval by making sure that pretty much no cows are inseminated beyond 45 days from their previous insemination. So this farm still takes advantage of the use of heat detection. So here we have the cows that are being detected in estrus anywhere from 20 to 30 days after the previous insemination. But after those cows have been given the opportunity to be detected in estrus but were not, they are enrolled in the synchronization of ovulation programs like oxen, and cows that were not inseminated before will receive a timely breeding. In this case, it is a farm that is enrolling cows on a weekly basis, which explains the spike on day 42, because cows are being enrolled 32 days after their previous insemination in the oxen protocol, also known as resync, when used for second and subsequent breeding. So here we have the oxen protocol when used to manage cows for second and subsequent breeding. And you can see that the protocol itself is absolutely similar to the one used to breed cows for first breeding. Basically, the protocol starts with a generate injection. 7 days later, cows will be diagnosed for pregnancy, and of course, there is some variation here, which we'll go on to discuss in the next few slides. In this case, the premise is that non-pregnancy, the diagnosis of pregnancy test is conducted 7 days after the generate injection, and that is the day in which cows that are not pregnant receive the prostaglandin injection of the protocol, so they can continue into the protocol to receive their next breeding through time AI. I am pretty sure that most of you are very familiar with the protocol, and this protocol is by far the one that is used the most in commercial dairy farms, both in the Northeast and across the U.S. Probably one of the biggest differences across farms, and one of the things that will have pretty important implications on the outcome of using the oxen protocol for second and subsequent breeding, is the timing at which the protocol begins after the previous insemination. So here we have the previous insemination, which is not necessarily a time AI. It can be either a time AI breeding or it can be an estrus breeding. So that's a mistake here to say time AI and not just artificial insemination. So basically the difference is that the first generate injection of the protocol will be given to cows at 25 days, 32 days, or 39 days after the previous insemination, with the most important consequence of changing the interval from AI to the next round of resynchronization being the change in the interbreeding interval. So when cows start the oxen protocol 25 days after the previous breeding, their interbreeding interval, or the distance in days between two inseminations, will be 35 days, as opposed, for example, to 49 days when the first generate injection of the protocol is given 39 days after the previous insemination. I also want to point out that I'm referring here to the average days in which cows will be enrolled in the resync protocol, but for farms that enroll cows on a weekly basis, there will be a range of days if cows are inseminated in estrus for all breeding. So basically, as an example, for day 32, it will be 32 plus minus 3 days. So cows will be enrolled from 29 to 35 days to receive the first generation injection. So for simplification, I just use the average day, and that's what I will continue to do through my presentation. So for now on, I'll discuss briefly some of the pros and cons of each one of the intervals and under which circumstances these type of programs or different intervals may be useful for dairy farms. So in my experience, and actually based on some of the data that we have been able to collect from a group of approximately 50 to 60 farms, resynchronization or the use of options starting on day 32 after the previous insemination is the most common strategy used by dairy farms. In this case, like I previously mentioned, all cows that were not affected in estrus after the previous insemination will receive the first generation injection of the protocol. There will be prep check 7 days later, and they will continue into the protocol. A potential alternative or modification to the protocol is to conduct the pregnancy test by ultrasound a week earlier, so on day 32, and in that case, only non-pregnant cows will receive the first generation injection and then continue into the protocol. So the advantage of that program is that pregnant cows will not receive a generation injection. There is no problem with giving pregnant cows a generation injection if they were not, if pregnancy testing is not conducted at this point. But for farms that have very high seed detection before day 32, it's very likely that a lot of cows that are pregnant will receive a generation injection which is not needed. And as I previously mentioned too, the intervening interval in this case is 42 days. On the other hand, the resync day 39 is the exact same program as the previous one, except that the interval from AI to the first generation injection is 39 days. And in this case, one advantage is that pregnancy testing, and this is the assumption here is that pregnancy testing is being conducted by rectal palpation. Of course, it can also be done through ultrasound, but for farms that have no access to ultrasound or to blood pregnancy testing, this may be a good alternative because only cows that are non-pregnant on day 39 will be enrolled to receive the option protocol. The only caveat of such program is that now the interbreeding interval is 49 days instead of 42 days. And as we previously discussed, the interbreeding interval is quite important. However, there will be situations or circumstances for dairy farms in which extending the interbreeding interval may not be as problematic, and we will discuss that soon. On the other hand, there is the option of starting resync on day 25. In this case, all cows, irrespective of their pregnancy status, need to receive the generation injection. As far as I know, there is no pregnancy test available to be used on day 25 ±2. So all cows receive the generation injection in this case, and then pregnancy testing should be conducted 7 days later on day 32. In this case, ultrasound should be used because it's too early for rectal palpation, at least for the majority of the technicians that use rectal palpation, and then cows continue into the protocol. A benefit of this program is a shorter intervening interval of 35 days. However, it is very important to keep in mind, and this is one thing that I always discuss with dairy farms at the time of considering the use of a day 25 resync protocol, is that if the farm intends to breed cows in estrus after the previous insemination, it's very likely that the protocol will interfere with estrus expression because a high percentage of the cows that are expected to show estrus within the 20 to 30 day range will probably not show estrus because given a generation injection, which will likely induce ovulation in a lactating dairy cow on day 25 ±3, will suppress estrus. Therefore, farms will end up breeding a lot more cows on time AI than based on estrus detection. So again, for farms that prefer to or want to breed the majority of their cows or as many cows as possible based on estrus detection, they should avoid the use of a GnRH injection so early after the previous insemination because they will not be able to inseminate as many cows in estrus as planned. So, in summary, for the use of the very simple rinsing protocol or option for second and subsequent breeding in combination for time AI, the only thing to make a decision about is what is the interval that the farm would like to use from the previous insemination to the beginning of the protocol. And here, that decision should be made based on the previous history for the herd, for their success to find calcium heat, or based on what the herd expects as far as being able to detect calcium heat. So, whether the farm uses a 32-day interval, and actually here I could even include a 25-day interval or the longer intervals, will depend on how, on the proportion of cows that the farm is able to find heat after the previous insemination. For dairy farms that are not able to find a lot of cows in estrus, it's very likely that they would benefit by shorter intervals to the beginning of the option protocol. On the other hand, for those farms that have good heat detection and catch a lot of cows in heat after the previous breeding, they can delay the beginning of the option protocol because the vast majority of the cows will be inseminated in estrus, and the urgency or the need to breed the rest of the cows sooner is not as critical or important in those cases. Let's say that, for example, a dairy herd has very successful heat detection and up to 75 to 80% of the cows are detected in estrus after the previous insemination. The impact of starting the protocol a little later, such as 39 days after the previous breeding, will not be as dramatic as for a herd that has very poor heat detection, and their intervening interval would be extended for a lot of cows unless they start the protocol earlier. So very simple, based on the history of the herd or the prospects for heat detection, farms can decide on the best timing to start the rinsing protocol. So that's a very brief and quick summary of the most common programs, and I'd like to touch now on a question that many farms have at the moment based on some of the latest research that is being conducted at the moment, and this has to do with the use of an additional prostaglandin injection at the time of the prostaglandin injection for rinsing. For second and subsequent breeding. We discussed the same concept for cows inseminated for first breeding with protocols such as double option last week. I'll show you now very briefly some data that is available today for cows inseminated after the use of a rinsing protocol. I want to warn you that I'm not showing you the entire data set or the entire experimental design because I won't have the time to do so. So I'll just go straight to the most critical points. But this is something that is relatively recent, and I think that there is a lot more research to do in this area. But again, it's a question that I'm getting from many dairy producers and consultants, and I know that they are interested on this type of strategy. So I'll show you some results from a study that was recently conducted by Dr. Paul Fritz's lab at the University of Wisconsin. And basically, they tested the use of one injection of prostaglandin versus two injections of prostaglandin 24 hours apart at the time of the prostaglandin rinsing. So here are the results for luteal regression and pregnancy-free eye. As you know probably, the reason to give a second prostaglandin injection is to improve luteal regression and expect that because of that improved luteal regression, cows will have better fertility or better pregnancy-free eye. These results that I'm showing you here include not only cows treated with the option protocol, but also cows or two groups of cows that receive a GnRH injection 7 days before the first GnRH of releasing. But again, the data is not separated in the publication, so I have to show it all combined. But the point here is that giving a second prostaglandin injection for cows that are being resynchronized improve luteal regression quite dramatically. So a 98% luteal regression for lactating dairy cows for second and subsequent breeding is excellent luteal regression. And the levels or the percentage of cows that were observed without luteal regression is actually very similar to what has been described in the literature and what we see in commercial dairy farms. So pretty important, pretty significant benefit for luteal regression. And for cows resynchronized as opposed to cows that were bred for first breeding, for which I mentioned last week that the benefit is in the 3 to 5 percentage point range, at least for this study, for which I really would like to warn you that the number of cows included or available in this data set is probably not large enough as to make decisions for all dairy farms. I think that there is more research to be done, more experiments to replicate this type of treatment, but at least with the results that are available from this study that has been recently published, there is a 9 percentage point difference in favor of the second course of the treatment that included the second prostaglandin injection. Again, very exciting results. I think that if we can improve pregnancy spare-EI by this much for second and subsequent breeding, that will have a tremendous impact on the overall reproductive performance and 21-day pregnancy rate of our herd. However, I really would like you to be aware of the fact that, the limited number of cows, maybe precludes, drawing, or generalizing the conclusion from this study to all herds. So, with that said, I'll go on to discuss the results of a recent study which was conducted in my lab, and in this case, this had to do also with another very common question that I get from dairy producers, consultants, and veterinarians, and that has to do with the impact of not having corpus luteum on the day of the prostaglandin injection of the releasing protocol. So we do have in our commercial herds cows that do not have a CL present at the time of the prostaglandin injection, and to make a long story short, cows that do not have a CL at this time point will have low fertility after the TANI breeding. In many studies that have observed or evaluated pregnancy spare-EI of cows that had a CL or not, the results have shown that cows that do have a CL have the typical pregnancy spare-EI for cows that are resynchronized 30 to 35%, as opposed to those cows that do not have a CL, which tend to have very low fertility, usually in the range to 10 to 15 percentage points. So it's almost half or less of the fertility that we observe in cows with a CL. So the question for the study that I'll go on to describe basically was, what can we do to treat, or what is a good treatment alternative for cows that do not have a CL at the time of the prostaglandin injection of the releasing protocol? So we conducted a study that was relatively simple. Basically, at the time of the non-pregnancy diagnosis, cows were evaluated through transrectal ultrasound, and within the group of cows that did not have a CL, because cows that did have a CL went on to complete the resynchronization protocol, so they received the prostaglandin injection this day and completed opting. For the cows that did not have a CL, we used two different treatments. We either re-enroll those cows in the opting protocol, but with projection supplementation through a CEDAR device. So basically, we put a CEDAR on the day of the non-pregnancy test when we saw that these cows did not have a CL, and we kept that CEDAR for 7 days, so it was removed at the time of the prostaglandin injection. So this is a protocol that is actually used quite a bit in dairy farms, But the question was if there would be differences with another protocol that is a potential alternative to treat cows that do not have SCL. We know for a fact that cows that do not have SCL at the time to start opting, they will do very poorly. So we do not want to start cows again in the opting protocol. So we have to look for strategies that provide progesterone. In this case, we use a feeder device. And in this case, for the second treatment, basically what we did, we tried to generate progesterone endogenously, so through the formation of a corpus luteum. So we gave cows a GnRH injection, hoping that they would ovulate. So 7 days later, when they started the opting protocol to receive their TANAI, they did have STL present. And because of that, we would expect those cows to have good fertility after the TANAI break. So again, 2 different ways, 2 potential strategies to improve the fertility of cows that we know will have poor fertility if they complete the reaching protocol. So our results for this study in terms of pregnancy spray were quite interesting. I would like you to focus your attention on this part of the results. So cows were also inseminated in estrus in the protocol, and there's nothing that we can do about that. So the cows will have the fertility that they have when they are inseminated in estrus. Our goal was to improve the fertility of cows that were inseminated on TANAI. And as you can see here in this table, those cows that received both the option plus progesterone treatment or the 3G option treatment, so the one that uses the GnRH injection to resynchronize the estrus cycle. I remind you that these cows were expected to have 10 to 15 percentage points for pregnancy spray if left untreated. In this case, these cows had similar fertility than those cows that did have SCL and completed the breeding protocol. And in fact, you can see that there was a tendency for pregnancy spray to actually be better for those cows that were treated, that didn't have SCL and received the treatment. Of course, I don't know if this will probably hold true in all cases, and it's very likely that conception rate of pregnancy spray will be the same, and actually that was our goal. So at the end of the day, the message is that we were able to restore the fertility of a subgroup of cows expected to have very poor fertility if they were left untreated and completed the protocol. We did not, we checked for pregnancy again, and we looked for pregnancy losses, and just for you to know, we did not observe any differences that we checked both for pregnancy spray and then we did not observe any differences for pregnancy loss. And at the end of the day, what is the most important to dairy producers is whether or not cows are pregnant earlier or later using one of the 2 strategies. And basically the results of the study here, you have the survival analysis for time to pregnancy from the approximate time of the first non-pregnancy diagnosis to 400 days in milk. And I remind you, those of you who are not very familiar with survival curves, that the faster the line for the survival goes down, the faster cows became pregnant during the observation period. And as you can see here, there was absolutely no difference with either one of the treatments. So basically what this means is that dairy farms have the option of using either the option protocol with progesterone supplementation or the 3G option protocol that uses synchronization with GnRH to treat cows that do not have SCL and improve their fertility. So the expectation is that cows through the lactation, those cows that have this problem of not having SCL, they will get pregnant as well as other cows in the herd and will not lead. The treatments will not lead to any differences. In fact, the median days to pregnancy were very similar for both treatments. So, again, in conclusion, the results of the study support that it is possible to improve the fertility of a group of cows that was expected to have lower fertility. Both strategies are feasible alternatives for dairy herds, and then, data that I will show you that the cows seem to respond based on what we expect. So, changing gears a little bit here, I didn't discuss yet some of the other alternatives that dairy farms have available to breed cows for second and subsequent breeding. And in recent years, there has been a growing interest on breeding as many cows in heat as possible. Some herds prefer to breed more cows in heat than letting them go to the time AI with the traditional combination of estrus detection and time AI. So can we minimize or reduce a little more the percentage of cows that are bred on time AI? So basically, this is a strategy that is, sometimes very appealing to herds that have automated activity monitoring systems, or again, that really would like to breed more cows in heat. So when compared to the previous distribution, or basically the thinking here is that we would like to generate another spike of cows showing heat after the natural heats that were observed from the previous breeding. So my way to represent this is to basically have this second subgroup of cows that will show heat after, cows have shown heat naturally after the previous insemination. So a potential way of accomplishing that is to give cows a prostaglandin injection after they have been diagnosed non-pregnant, any days after the previous insemination, and this depends on when the farm is conducting non-pregnancy diagnosis. And I'll start by describing the situation. So I'll use now as an example, a situation in which all cows receive a prostaglandin injection, but I'll show you an alternative for which cows are managed a little bit differently based on what they have on their ovaries. So basically the idea here is that after cows are found non-pregnant, they receive a prostaglandin injection and they have another opportunity to be detected in estrus and inseminated. So instead of enrolling them directly into the time AI protocol, whether it's the option protocol or any other resynchronization of ovulation protocol, cows will show estrus again, and only after that second opportunity, cows will be enrolled in a synchronization of ovulation protocols such as option. So I'll describe a recent study that was conducted by my lab here in New York, in which we were basically testing one of these strategies. As a control group, we used a very typical estrus detection and day 32 leasing program. So the program that I've been discussing previously in the presentation, except that the non-pregnancy test was conducted at 32 days rather than at 39 days. For the treatment group, or the group for which we were trying to maximize the percentage of cows inseminated in estrus, cows were tested for pregnancy at 32 days after the previous insemination. So of course, cows were eligible to be detected in estrus before then. And at the time of the non-pregnancy diagnosis, in an attempt to make the program more efficient, what we did was to separate cows based on the presence or the absence of the corpus luteum, or CL, at the time of pregnancy testing, with the idea that it is only useful to give a prostaglandin injection to a cow that has a CL, and there is no point in giving a prostaglandin injection to a cow that does not have a CL, and at the same time, cows without a CL may benefit by using a different program. So in very basic terms, what we did, we gave the prostaglandin injection, and then cows were detected in heat. In this case, this farm was using an automated heat detection system. So we gave the cows 9 days to be detected in estrus, hoping that we would detect a very high percentage of the cows in heat, and only after those 9 days, cows were enrolled in the time AI protocol. I'll not describe now, in the interest of time, why we use this protocol in particular and why we use the 9 days, but as you will see at the end, I'll give you as an option to use 7 days here and just the opt-in protocol. We have very, clear reasons why we chose this, but I don't have the time to describe it now. The important point again is that we were trying to maximize the proportion of cows bearing heat, and we wanted to make sure that those cows not detected in heat receive the time reading to avoid extending or overextending their intervening interval any longer. On the other hand, for cows without SCL, the treatment was given cows with GnRH injection 2 days after the non-pregnancy test, which was 7 days before the beginning of the time protocol. If you remember from the previous study, this is pretty much the same as the 3G opt-in protocol, in which we are trying to create a corpus luteum or CL that will be present 7 days later when cows start the time protocol. Of course, cows were allowed to be inseminated in estrus throughout the protocol, but not a lot of cows show heat here because they were given GnRH. A very important point for this data is that we only found 65% of the cows with a CL present at the time of non-pregnancy diagnosis, so we were expecting to find a little closer to 80 or 85%. For this herd in particular, it was a little lower, so 65% of the cows did receive a prostaglandin injection. And the other surprising outcome of the study was that instead of finding 60 to 65% of the cows in heat, only 40% of the cows were detected in heat, even though we were using an automated activity monitoring system, so we cannot say that it was a human error, in this case, responsible for the relatively low heat detection. So the other 35% of the cows that did not have SCL ended up going through the protocol for cows without SCL. So when we compare again time to pregnancy, which at the end of the day is what matters to dairy farms, in this case you have the red line for the control group and the blue line for the treatment group, which actually combines cows that receive these treatments depending on what they have on their ovaries on the day of the preg check. So basically, the results showed us that there were, again, no differences between the treatments. So days to pregnancy or median days to pregnancy were the same in both cases, and the same take-home message as for the previous study. Dairy farms have the option of deciding which one is the best option for their own operations. If they prefer to use the estrus detection and breathing protocol, as many farms do, they will see the same type of results as the treatments that we tested, trying to maximize insemination of cows and estrus. So this type of strategy, trying to give cows a second opportunity, does work. In the case of our study, it worked, as well as the combination of estrus detection with data-based breathing. And I'll now describe some of the alternatives for using this type of program. So basically, those were the main findings, but some of the things are important to keep in mind when thinking about this type of programs that try to maximize cows inseminated in estrus is that based on our data and how similar the control and the treatment group were, it seems like at least 65% of the cows should have SCL, so they can receive a prostaglandin injection, and detection of estrus has to be quite, good or at least better than 40% of the cows detected in estrus. I believe personally this is, the bottom for the two parameters, or the lower level for the two parameters. Herds that have less than 65% of the cows with SCL, or detect less than 40% of the cows in heat after the prostaglandin injection, may take a hit on their overall reproductive performance. And of course, what we know very well, and I probably have emphasized enough yet, is that it's always critical to have a SIM program implemented systematically right after cows have given that extra opportunity to show heat. So we always need to have the safety net of the time-alive protocol. So in summary, for this second part in which I describe programs that try to maximize insemination of cows in estrus, There is the simplest strategy, which basically consists on giving a prostaglandin injections to all cows, whether or not they do have a CL. So this may be an alternative for herds that do not want to differentiate cows based on their ovarian status. And then, as I previously mentioned, either 7 or 9 days. 7 would make it way more practical than trying to start a protocol 9 days later. I mentioned 9 days here only because this is the range for which we have data that it works, but I would expect 7 days to work as well. And in fact, there is some data from other research studies which have shown that even a 7-day interval from prostaglandin to the beginning of the offspring protocol may be as effective. So 7 to 9 days after the prostaglandin injection, cows not detected in estrus receive the offspring protocol. The other option is for herds that want to make the program a little more efficient and want to not give prostaglandin to cows unnecessarily because they don't have a CL. In this case, at the time of the non-pregnancy diagnosis, cows with a CL are the ones that receive the prostaglandin injection and continue the protocol. So by being detected in estrus and enrolled in the time-AI program is not detected in estrus. In this case, what I include here, which I apologize I did not include here, it is also an option to include a CEDAR device. This is exactly what we did in our study. To be honest with you, based on our data, I cannot tell whether it's necessary or not, but in our case, to be on the safe side, we did include a CEDAR device, assuming that a lot of the cows that would reach this point because were not detected in estrus after the prostaglandin were probably not cycling. On the other hand, for cows with no CL, I think that it's probably unnecessary to use the 3G offspring protocol. In this case, the enrollment of cows in a CEDAR theme protocol, so that the offspring protocol with a CEDAR device should work quite well. And in fact, this is a little bit closer to what some of the commercial herds that I've been working with are using when they want to maximize the insemination of cows detected in heat. So that puts an end on the strategies that rely more heavily on the combination of estrus detection and time-AI, and I'll very briefly touch now on those strategies that rely more on time-AI. In this case, it is very important to think about why we would want to use more time-AI for second and subsequent breeding. And my thinking is always that it should be the case for herds that cannot implement an effective heat detection program after the previous insemination. Herds that are very successful with heat detection, both by finding a high percentage of cows in heat and getting high conception rate, should take advantage of that. So the use of time-AI for second and subsequent breeding should be only used when herds cannot find a high percentage of cows in heat or conception rate is very low. So through the years, many different studies have been conducted to test different programs to evaluate alternatives to improve the fertility of cows that receive time-AI. So I'll summarize in a very simple strategy, which is basically giving a GnRH injection, and this is very similar to some of the programs that I have been already discussing. A GnRH injection to all cows, in this case 7 days before the beginning of the offspring protocol, with the idea of creating or setting up cows to be at the right stage of the estrus cycle, so they have a corpus luteum and a follicle responsive to the GnRH injection 7 days later when they start the offspring protocol. We know that when cows start the offspring protocol or reaching under this condition or this stage of the estrus cycle around day 7 or so, they will have pretty good fertility after their time-AI. The critical thing to think about when using this type of program, again, is that it's very likely that there will not be a lot of heat detection being used. So it's very important, because of the length of the protocol, to start as soon as possible after the previous insemination. So as early as 18 days after the previous breeding. Herds that do that will have to prep check their cows at 32 days and use ultrasound. but it is possible, and we have some studies that have documented that type of management strategies. But for those that don't want to be as aggressive or cannot break checkouts early, they can start either on day 25 or 32. Probably 32 is a little too late because the intervening interval will be too long. However, if this type of program is the only alternative, it should probably be considered as well. So what producers should expect out of this is to increase pregnancies per AI in approximately 4 to 5 percentage points. So based on the recollection of data from several studies, it seems that giving that extra GnRH injection 7 days before starting a rinsing program will lead to a 4 to 5 percentage increment in pregnancies per AI. I cannot stress enough again that if farms are using GnRH or giving cows GnRH too early after the previous insemination, they will reduce estrus expression. So again, this is a type of alternative for dairy farms that do not want or cannot use heat extraction. So to finish my presentation, I just wanted to mention that I summarized all the different strategies that I have covered today, and I separated them again based on those ones that favor insemination of cows in estrus or for time AI. I will not go on to describe all of them because I already did, but I wanted to leave them all together so those of you who are watching the seminar again or will look at the slides and have an idea of where some of the alternatives. So to conclude my presentation, I just want to mention that a successful Reproductive program, whatever that program is, depends more than anything on being proactive, implementing the program systematically and consistently. It is also very important that the program is conducted by committed personnel who prioritizes attention to detail. So there are a lot of steps in these management programs that have to be done in the right way. So the people conducting these programs have to be paying attention to even the smallest detail because they can have an impact on the overall outcome. And of course, just like with anything else, we need to have healthy cows. With that, I conclude my presentation by acknowledging my collaborators, the farms with which we work for our studies, my students and technicians, and of course, my funding sources such as the New York Farm Biodiversity Institute, the USDA NIPA program, and my partners at Dairy Health and Management Services. And here you have my email in case that you would like to contact me in the future. Thank you for your attention, and I'll be open to any questions.
Thank you for that excellent presentation, Julio. If you would like information about what was presented today, or if you have questions for Julio, please use the email that you see on your screen, or go ahead and check out Julio's blog. Thank you very much for joining us.